All yours, Nadia.
Thank you. I love what you said there. We're here to make things easier for you. I love that. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I'm Nadia, and I'm a incredibly grateful and recovered alcoholic. And I'm so happy to be here again. Feels like it's been, I don't know why, it just feels like it's been a really long time since we got together. That's all these long weekends and public holidays that we've had. Okay, welcome to everybody who's joined with us. We are finally on the doctor's opinion. Roman numerals page XXV. That's 25. So before we kick off this, we did quite a bit of swimming around the forwards to the first, second, third, and fourth edition. And the doctor's opinion is also, each page is also numbered with the Roman numerals. And quite often when I buy a new book, and those front pages, the table of contents and the preface and the thanks and all of that, where had Roman numerals, I just flip over and start at page 1. But I think you've all seen that there's quite a bit of treasure in these Roman numeral pages. And you're going to be finding some more treasures as we go through these pages now. So Roman numerals page XXV, page 25, the doctor's opinion. Very important to know that this is the only chapter that is written by a non-alcoholic. And this chapter also includes 2 letters. So Bill had an experience. We'll read about that in Bill's story, and we'll hear some of it now as well in this chapter. Bill had an experience, a spiritual experience. He was removed from the desire to drink in Towns Hospital, and then went back to the hospital to carry the message, to tell other alcoholics. And what they did was Dr. Silkworth gave him and the other alcoholics that proceeded to recover this letter so that they could go to hospitals with this letter and knock on doors and say, please, can we come see some alcoholics? Can we come and help them? So we're going to read the first letter. I think we might get through it tonight. Let's go. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader, that's me, that's you, will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience, not just knowledge, with the sufferings. Oh man, we know all about the sufferings. We can spend hours and hours on the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. That's a promise. And that's recovered. You know, that word recovered is so contentious in a lot of meetings, but that's all it means. Just a return to health. What a beautiful promise. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital. So that's Dr. William D. Silkworth, our beloved doctor. And the prominent hospital is Towns Hospital in New York, specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. And I know in AA meetings, singleness of purpose, we speak about alcohol only, but this was treated, both alcoholics and drug addicts were treated. They gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. I just made a couple of notes at the top, and this is for when I take my newcomer or prospect through the book. I ask them these 3 questions. I ask them to, while we're going through this, to say, does this description fit me? The description of the alcoholic that is going to proceed in these pages, does this fit me? 2, I ask him, are we going to change a lot of these statements into questions? Are these statements true for me? And the third thing I ask them to do is to change all the pronouns to me and I, because my alcoholic ego will separate me from you the minute I start seeing they, them, and his and her. That's not me. Then I'm not like you guys. And we're asking you to look for the similarities, not the differences, because the minute, remember the 3 essentials of recovery: open-mindedness, honesty, and willingness. That open-mindedness, we're asking you to cast aside any prejudice, any old ideas. So that's a little exercise I have my sponsees do. And yeah, the plan of recovery. That's it. The plan of recovery is in this book. I used to look at uh, sorry, now I can't think of the word. Now I can't even think of the word, like the roll-up banner that would hang in the meetings, with the 12 steps. And I, for 7 years, in and out of these rooms, thought that that was the 12-step program. I read it and I'd done it. But what I didn't know, what I didn't know is that they'd hidden the instructions to those steps in this book. uh, Yeah, and then I just love this, also please I think what we need to do is we need to time travel a little bit. So there's Dr. Silkworth. If you look at Rob's Hollywood screen, you're going to see one of our beloved founders, and you're going to see our beloved Dr. Silkworth. Look at him and look at that man's eyes and that little cheeky smile he's got going there, because he knows something. This man, can you just imagine what he has witnessed in his life? Death, insanity, people being locked up, families being broken. Yesterday we lost someone in our home group to this disease. And it wasn't from the consumption. He had drank, obviously he was inactive, but he had fallen and he died of his injuries. An alcoholic death, I think, spans many symptoms and many things that can happen to us. And Dr. Silkworth witnessed this. He witnessed us leave Towns Hospital in a good mood, in a good physical state. We've got this thing. Yeah, we've got it. I'm not going to drink again. I'm feeling amazing. We're detoxed and we're dried out. And he witnesses us leave in high spirits, and he's in high spirits. And then what does he do? He witnesses us return, bent, broken, cut, bruised, bleeding. Can you imagine the heartache that this man has experienced? And Bill's going to give you a lovely anecdote, none of something that he's shared with me before, what Dr. Silkworth spoke about when he saw us. And yeah, and then just again, I'm going to hand over to Bill now, just to also the promise that's there, the witnessed our return to health. That's why that man's smiling like that. He'd seen, I don't know how many, I think, what is it, Bill, 55,000 hopeless alcoholics. And we're going to come to it now. In Towns Hospital, if you were treated 3 times, if you came in and came out and went in and came out and in and out, on that 3rd time, your 3rd strike, they would send you to a wet brain institution. And you would do the Thorazine shuffle for the end of, until the end of days. All right, that's me.
What you want me to add to that? I've been in treatment a lot more than 3 times. Thank God they didn't put me on the Thorazine sample for life. It was described that Dr. Silkworth had invested. It's interesting when you read the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then we look at it in today's. He had spent his entire life. He was an older guy. He was getting ready for retirement. He invested his entire savings in the stock market, and then the stock market collapsed. And he ended up having to go to work at Towns Hospital for $40 a week plus a place to stay. That was his retirement. And he didn't always specialize in alcoholism. But what happened is he described it. I hope this is what Nadia is talking about. He said he could detect the stench from these penitent drunks, he called him. And he said somehow he knew they didn't want to be like this. And what he did is he dedicated his life to helping him. And he's the one who came up with the idea, not being an alcoholic, that our reaction to alcohol, and in some cases, like Nadia says, specializing in alcohol and drug addiction, is that alcoholics had an abnormal reaction, meaning that they didn't experience what most people experience from alcohol. When they feel the effect, that's enough. With us, great thirst that comes by taking the first drink, which means it doesn't satisfy the thirst, but creates a greater thirst with each and every drink. Hence, we drink beyond the point where it's appropriate, when it would be the right time to stop some important engagement. And he describes it. We'll get into that, but I mean, it's just a fascinating story that he came up with the theory as a non-alcoholic. And it may be in Not God, but and I haven't read that. I was supposed to get a copy, but I did read the book Bill W. My First 40 Years, or the First 40 Years. And it talks about how Dr. Silkworth was one who had never been in the cave, but he almost understood what it was like to be in the cave. And the thing that makes Alcoholics Anonymous so successful is we're no longer standing outside of the cave telling you what you ought to do. And can't you see what it's doing to you and to her and to them? And we've been in the cave ourselves. So we identify with each other by sharing our experience, strength, and hope, rather than by giving directives to them, which they've been given all their life. They call it frothy emotional appeal. Well, I filled up enough space with that nonsense.
Thank you. All right, we'll continue. Now we're going to read the letter. To whom it may concern. Who's that? That's us. That's me. That's you. It's our family. It's the doctors. If we're doing CPC work, it'll be the attorneys and police. It is to anybody who's going to pick up and read this book, to whom it may concern. I have specialized in treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient, Bill W., who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. This disease does not discern. Poor, rich, young, old, brown, yellow, purple, American, British, doesn't matter. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. So I just want you to, let's time travel again. Let's go back to Dr. Silkworth's wards, the general wards where these alcoholics are lying in beds, rows upon rows like sardines. And there's this gentleman who's been in and out of his ward, out of his hospital for treatment, and he comes back remarkably different, and he says, I want to help. Can you imagine like going back to your treatment center after how many times leaving and coming back in and leaving and coming back in, hopeless, dying, and they're about to lock you up, and you come back and you're like, hey, I got the solution, let me help you. I mean, that's pretty cool. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. There's that beautiful promise again. So let's just look here. I want to focus on this word here. He says in the course of his third treatment, as part of his rehabilitation, is doing the 12-step work, where he says he has to present his conception to other alcoholics. 12-step work is a part of the solution. What is the whole solution? Well, it's put very succinctly on page 98. You know what we're going to do? Now we're going to zoot on over to page 98. I'll take some time, give you a second or two to get there, page 98. And we're going to go down to the third paragraph. Carrying the message, helping others is just a part of this. Because what is it? It is the only condition is that he trusts in God and clean house and help others. So quite important to remember, because we bang on about carrying this message, sponsoring, getting sponsees. I hear that a lot in the rooms, but we forget it is about trusting God, cleaning house, and helping others. That's our beautiful triangle, right? Yep. That's it. That's it for that paragraph. Bill, have you got anything to say before we carry on?
So it's interesting that you brought that up. I never paid attention to that word. It's part of his rehabilitation, which is only part. The steps for the other, it talks about, and there is a solution, I believe, right? Not all of us are working with others, maybe wherever it is, somewhere in the book, it says that not all of us can give our time, all of our time. Not everyone
Location.
can do 52 12-step compendiums a week like Steve and Rob, you know what I mean? Some of us have to have regular jobs and take care of our kids and all that, but some are so situated they can give nearly all their time. But even so, if we shared this information with someone as an outsider, or even as an alcoholic who hasn't taken the work, there's a lot of this going on lately. A lot of people reading the book to each other. I call it bedtime stories. Reading the book to someone without applying without putting application into this process is not going to produce the necessary change. So that's part of his rehabilitation is a 12-step, like you talked about it, working with others. But it talks about a much more important demonstration lies ahead in our occupations, families, and affairs. We've got to do more than just, and I'll say this since you got me going now. Bill Wilson, for so long, tried to use his first step experience with other people to help them, and that was insufficient. If you remember the story of Bill being sober a few months and against his wife's premonition that it wasn't a good idea to go golfing. She didn't want to rain on his parade because, after all, he had been sober a few months. He went to his brother-in-law's club and was on a bus and struck up a conversation with someone over a rifle because he had done some skeet shooting in his day. And all of a sudden, the trolley car or the bus had gotten in an accident, so they had to unboard that vehicle. And while they were waiting, they struck up a conversation. It happened to be a place that served alcohol and sandwiches, the speakeasy, I guess they called it. And he spoke easy, all right. And he spoke easy about how alcohol had destroyed his life over and over again. And then they got back on a new bus that was sent to pick them up and take them to their destination. And one got there early and the other one got there ahead of time. And they went in for one more sandwich. And the guy ordered another drink, and Bill continued to tell him. And then all of a sudden, it was Armistice Day, as we know, is Veterans Day now. And the bartender said, "Hey, here's one on the house." And Bill picked up the drink after 2 hours of telling this guy how alcohol destroyed his life. And he was one of those that should not drink. He must not drink. And it says he threw the drink down as carelessly as if it was ginger ale. And the guy looked at him. He said, "Mister, after everything you told me about alcohol and what did to your life, and you just drank, you must be crazy." And I think that's where our second step came from. Bill said, "I'm insane." And that's the reality. We have the insanity. That's the second component, which Silkworth didn't have the remedy for. But I think Carl Jung had expressed it to Roland Hazard when he had gone to see him. So we'll get into that. This is just the beginning. We don't want to give too much information. We got to give them something to come back next week for.
Thanks, Bill. All right, we're still on page 25, Roman numerals XXV, the last paragraph. I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. Let's just stop. Just for 30 seconds, let's think of our own other methods. Church, exorcism. I mean, my mother sent me to a pastor for an exorcism. Yoga retreats, moving to a different continent. Self-help books, New Year's resolutions, gym contracts. Changing religions. I don't know. What have we tried? Antidepressants. I think the list goes on ad infinitum. 131 ways, all failed. Angela, absolutely, I hear you, sister. All failed completely. But I will add, and I will add this. I've been quick to see where religious people are right, and all those things, churches and pastors and, other beautiful sacred scripture that's out there. Those are enhancing my recovery experience today. But them on their own, without the spiritual experience this book facilitates, they fell flat. Today, though, they just explode. These facts appear. What facts? What facts is he talking about? Brother Bill just spoke about it now. The allergy and the obsession. He just spoke about it now. The two facts that I can wash my hands. If you put a bowl of alcohol in front of me now and chuck in all the codeine pills and gazillion bags of, I can wash my hands in that and it will not hurt me. It will not hurt me. I will not see it even. But if I have to put that inside of me, just a teeny tiny little teaspoon, it'll trigger that allergy and I will be off to the races. And the second fact, because he's saying here, the facts that appear to be of extreme medical importance, the second fact is that you can take all of that stuff away from me. And then I have a mind that after I've told everyone, sat and told someone for 2 hours how painful and ridiculously destroyed my life is because of alcohol, and then accept a drink without even flinching and drink it as if it were ginger ale. Those are the two facts. Because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group, they may mark a new epoch. So in America, I think you guys say epoch, and the British English say epoch. Okay, so it might sound a little bit different. I did try and Google the different translations in the annals of alcoholism. And epoch, I Googled the word. It is a particular period of time, and annals is a record of events of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. And it does, this book, I have treated people who are in Coda, who are in Al-Anon, who are in Over Anonymous. I have used this book to treat that. It says here on page 107, this is here's some symptoms that our Coda and our Al-Anon brothers and sisters have. Let's go look. We speak about it here as well because the families were involved in this right from the word go. Not now so much. We're very separated. On page 107, the first paragraph about the third line, it says here, most of us, and they're talking here about the wives and the family, affected by this family disease of alcoholism. This is a family disease. This is not just you and I that suffer from this. Have entered the final stage with its commitment to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. Sometimes there was screaming, delirium, and insanity. Death was often near. Now, they're talking about the alcoholic, but I've seen Al-Anons untreated, Codas untreated. They will tell you that they've been in the same places, plotting murder. My sponsor can take it or leave it. She can have a glass of wine, she can take it or leave it, but she cannot take a relationship because before she knows it, she's plotted their murder. This is a disease, a family disease. Her disease, her ailment is thinking. She picks up one thought and another thought, and before she knows it, she's picked up 10 and she's blacked out. And she's running down the street chasing her lover, begging him to come home. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Guys, you could never rely on a single word I ever said. Because for me to be honest, was the most unnatural thing in the world. For me to lie was the most natural thing. The most natural thing was for me to lie. I love it. Angela's like, she's totally getting me today. Angela, I love it. You're I know I'm in the right room here. You could not rely on a single word that came out of my mouth. Here's Dr. Silkworth saying you may rely absolutely on anything these men say. That's a massive stamp, right? Here's a little bit of history though. He didn't put his name on the first edition because he didn't want his doctor buddies to know that he had put a stamp of approval on us. But I think it was the second or the third, I'm not sure, maybe Bill can correct me, that he put his stamp of approval and he put his name there because he became our beloved doctor of drunks. Yeah.
I think it was said
Thank
in
you.
one of the other studies this week that his name wasn't added till after he had passed, but that may have not been the case. But he didn't attribute his name to it in the first place just because of the newness of it and what the medical profession would do, you know, taking a risk for his, almost like the traditions were being applied so that it wouldn't risk his reputation. But I want to go back to something you said there, and that's marvelous that you brought up page 107. The secretary of my home group said that the insane asylums are filled with people that suffer from alcoholism that never took the first drink. And what a description here, as animals on a treadmill, and they're talking about themselves or the wives here. We have patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. And here's what it says, and we assume they're talking about the alcoholic, and I suspect they are. But what if they're talking about the people who grew up with alcoholics that lose their minds with this insidious illness, right? Most have entered the first stage with its commitment to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. They are not above the law, and they tell us that in this chapter that you're talking about. It says, we have made the same mistakes our husband had. We've lied, we've gone out and had retaliatory love affairs. You hear some stories in Al-Anon where people have made penitentiary decisions under the influence of the alcoholic, though they be not drunk. I mean, this is an insidious disease, and it's going to talk about it in several places in the book. The blameless lives of children, the sad wives, and the insanity that this disease causes. And there are a lot of adult children of alcoholics that end up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when you listen to their stories, they swore to God they were never going to be like mom or dad. The good news is we usually exceeded that expectation and became worse. So it's all around a debilitating in what Nadia was talking about. This doctor realized that. I mean, he really, maybe he was created for this purpose. Maybe this was his assignment, like it says in our fourth step. So it's good stuff. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks, Bill. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms. So now we're going to have three statements. I want you to turn those into question marks. Three questions here to ask yourself, to ask your sponsee. He confirms that we who have suffered alcoholic torture. Nadia, have you suffered alcoholic torture? Yes, I have. Waking up at 2 in the morning with enough drugs and alcohol in my system to put down an elephant permanently, and I wake up at 2 and I can't get back to bed. And I'm in horror. I don't know what I've done. I can feel my chest beating. And that's just to name, like that's just a drop in the ocean. That the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It's my body. I remember when I first read that, I was like, I was I was aboard. It was like the first time I heard about being returned to sanity. I was like, I'm not insane. Like, no. But I had to admit these things to myself. And I had amazing sponsorship that she could share her experience with me. Nadia, how is your body as abnormal as your mind? I'll give you an example. If you give me pain medication, it doesn't work. I have to take 2 or 3. Where one person takes 1, schedule 5, I have to take 3. If you give me an antidepressant, it doesn't make me calm, it makes me aggressive. My body just never responded the same to everybody else. If I walked into I remember this, and I can't believe I'm going to share this with you guys, but I'm going to share it because this is what just came to mind, how different my body was. If there was a like a, you know, you had to learn a little poem in grade 2, let's say. You had to learn a little poem, right? And you stand in front of the class and you have to do your poem. You'd have the usual, you know, everybody has their usual little nervous bouts, you know, the sweaty palms and the heartbeat going. But I would sweat so profusely that you could smell me the whole day. Like my armpits, my shirts. I had such a harsh reaction. You know, if I was frightened, I would freeze. Freeze. If I was nervous, I would I would drip sweat. My body was as abnormal as my mind. And the third question, it did not satisfy. Whoa, hold on. Here's some hectic statements. So let's just stay with me. Strap on your seatbelts. Listen. We're asking for honesty here. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life. Nadia, were you maladjusted to life? Yeah, I went and quickly Googled that. I had a hard time coping with life permanently. I couldn't be part of school sports because I couldn't stand to be around so many people, but I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best sportsman, you know, but to be around so many people was debilitating for me. Was I maladjusted to life? Oh, hell yes, that's a big yes. Was that they were in full flight from reality? I was in full flight from reality. I was always running from something or to something. Always. People always used to say to me, like, where are you running to? Nadia, you look like you're permanently running from something. And if you came and put your head to my heart, you would hear that I was running from something because my heart was always beating in my chest profusely. Whether I was sitting in church with my mom on a Sunday or whether I was standing up in the choir, my heart was beating profusely. I was permanently in a state of flight, permanently.
It's easy to
All,
assume that he's talking about the obsession of the mind, but it may be broader than that. How many of us said coming up that we didn't fit? We felt like a
yeah,
square peg in a round hole or a round peg. There's something wrong with us. So self-conscious, so perversely self-centered, and just so out of order, as if Carl Jung described alcoholism as a low-level thirst for connection with the divine, as if we know that we don't belong in this realm, but we're stuck here for a while. And our thinking is flawed long before we pick up the drink. And then some of us are born with the manifestation of the allergy. I think all of us are born. Some of us get here much quicker, depending on how sensitive we are to alcohol. Because you hear some people had the phenomenon of craving from the first drink. That's why some of us end up in AA 3 months after our first drink. And then you listen to the stories of the heavy drinkers, I think, that describe alcoholism in terms of drinking and drinking and more drinking. Hell, I salivated. They said, why don't you go out and try some more controlled drinking? Try it more than once. I followed that direction for the next 4 decades. And I never knew that alcohol wasn't the problem. The problem was my reaction to it, and the problem centered in the mind, the inability to handle life on life's terms successfully without a remedy of spirit. One being alcohol, the spirits, that's why they call them spirits, and the other being the solution, which is the power of God. And the only problem is the power of God usually takes a little longer to access, but it's well more worth it. If I can get a drink instantly and get relief from you, which I think is my problem, why would I take 12 steps and find a way to be kind and loving toward all when I can take a drink and change my perception of reality? Reality doesn't change. Perception does. And because I need to change over and over and over again, I ultimately, as Shakespeare said, man will so gladly pour into his mouth that which will steal away his brain. That's me. He knew about me and Othello.
sure. Yeah, that's it. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I can teach anybody how to drink and use. I have a living problem, a living problem. And this describes it so beautifully. And I went and found some other pages because that's what I like doing, right? So we're going to get there now. It says here, just something really interesting. Outright mental defectives. It sounds like such a cool name for a gang or a meeting group, which is going around as a little pun for Terry's group. But do you know that a mental defective is actually admissible in court? Like it's an actual contractual issue that you, if you are found to be a mental defective, you may not sign contract documents. You could be charged. Like that's and the description is lacks ability to manage own affairs. Hello, does that not sound like a bit of a step one problem there? So let's go look. Let's go look what all of this stuff looks like. Maladjusted to life, full flight from reality, outright mental defectives. Let's go look. Page 58. Bounce on over. Let's go look. Page 58. We hear this in the meetings many, many, many times. Constitutionally incapable of being honest. Incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. There's some more. Hold on, I'm not done yet. Page 90. You don't have to go with me because you're going to have to go fish around for this word, but I'll read it to you and Rob will find it and post it in the chat. Page 90, here's another word that describes an alcoholic who is in his cups is an unlovely creature. Here's some more words to describe us. A sick person. Ugly. Depressed. Violent. Over to page 94. Hopeless. Page 96. Broke. Homeless. It describes us, right? And I'll know for a fact that is me. Like those adjectives are tick, 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 me. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. Now, I'm not saying that all those words might describe you right now. Not yet. Have you not heard that famous phrase? Not yet. Maybe you haven't lost your kids yet. This is a progressive and fatal disease. But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. And this has to be hammered to our newcomer, because if they can see the hopelessness of the physical reaction that they have to this, there's no running away from that. There's no running away from that. Yeah, that's it. That's me on this paragraph. Bill, have you got something to add? All right, we're going to continue. Roman numerals XXVI, page 26. We are on the third paragraph, and welcome to anybody who's maybe joined us now. I know the time zones have got all weirded out and whatever, so welcome if you have. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. And I think that is something that we're losing. I don't hear a lot. I hear a lot about the spiritual plane. I hear a lot about the spiritual toolkits. I hear a lot about the spiritual way of life, the spiritual exercises, the spiritual program of action. But I'm not hearing a lot about the altruistic lifestyle, being helpful to others. And you know, so here's some practical stuff my sponsor gave me, because it was all about 12-step work and working with the still suffering alcoholic or addict inside or outside of these rooms, carrying this message, going to working in the rehabs, sharing online. But it's not just that, it's helping others. So for my sponsees here where I live, we have practical things. We get involved in soup kitchens. we make sandwiches and take them down to the park where there are homeless people. Not necessarily to carry the message, just to give a sandwich and say, hey, you know, just that touch on their shoulder. Help out when there's Easter runs or, Christmas runs at the end of the year, handing out presents, whatever. I get them involved where they're not thinking about themselves. It's the altruistic lifestyle. And we're not hammering on enough on that. I don't hear enough of that in our rooms. Anyway, that might just be where I'm hanging out. It might not be the case everywhere because yeah. And they favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who's jittery or befogged. And there's also another school of thinking, like, oh no, that's rehab, watered down nonsense and whatever. We're not adverse to treatment. We've had, like, sadly, our brother who passed yesterday, had he maybe been afforded the chance to long-term treatment, long in a place where he could get away from alcohol. There wasn't enough, he was being kicked out, whatever. I'm not going to look for reasons here for what happened for him, but when we have newcomers come into our rooms and we see that these guys are literally, they're not able to speak. A lot of them are on a mix of benzodiazepams and alcohol. You cannot just come off that stuff cold turkey, in my experience. And I work closely with 2 doctors in our town. They emphatically insist that these guys need to get to treatment. They need treatment, hospitalization. And then we can start, and we stay close to them. We stay close to them. We stay close to the family. So yeah, we don't cross off treatment and rehabs. We favor hospitalization. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he then has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. And what is it we have to offer? A spiritual way of life. Simple spiritual toolkits through 12 exercises. There's a bit of action, there's a bit of work, there's a bit of writing, there's a bit of it confessing and talking about your past, and there is working with others, and there's some trust and faith in something that you can't see, that's not tangible. That's what they had to offer. Bill, have you got anything to add?
Just looked up the word imperative. And of course, we know it means important, right? It's crucial, it says. But then it's another giving an authoritative command, peremptory. So remember that they were dealing almost primarily, when this was written, with people who had drank themselves into institutions like Towns Hospital and now to be committed to asylums. I mean, I met a guy at my home group that tells an amazing story how he was tethered to a bed at an asylum for a long period of time. And every time the alcohol wore off and no one, a nurse came in and finally told him what the problem. His name was Chucky Bankston. And he said his arms were so torn from the tethers of him trying to break free. And he would spit on the nurses because his condition of abstinence caused tremendous restless irritability and discontentedness. And finally, the one nurse came in and she was real kind to him and says, "Why won't they let me up?" And she said, "Chuck, because of the way that you treat the nurses." And she diagnosed him as an alcoholic. Not everyone was aware of what was going on or the spiritual malady that this really was. And she said, "If you can promise me she'll behave," and he did, because he softened. Someone understood him. He released the tether. He went through Rosary Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, under Sister Nadia. And the stories that came out of there, they might have given you 3 shots in Towns Hospital. You got one time you could go through Rosary Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, and that was it. and the stories of the miracles that came out. It was boasted that almost no one who went through Rosary Hall and had contact with Sister Ignatia ever drank again. But just some amazing history that we don't get, and Rob may be able to put this up. There was a book about Sister Ignatia, and what they call her, Rob, the saint that loved drunks. I mean, I know Dr. Silkworth was called the little doctor that loved drunks. But Sister Ignatia did a lot. She wasn't an alcoholic, but she had her own problems in Ireland before she came here. She had a nervous breakdown. It's just, like I said, sometimes the history that gets lost in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get so excited of the Book of Mirrors here, and we find ourselves that we don't look at what was really going on. And the reason that it was imperative that their brains be cleared, some of them were almost at the point of being wet brains. And what that really meant is their brain actually dried out. It was actually a reverse diagnosis because their brain became so dehydrated that it almost was like fried. But they called it a wet brain, obviously induced by the chemical alcohol, the liquid drug alcohol. It's a lot different. Now you can get a guy, right? Most of them stumble right into an AA meeting as if they knew where they were going. Back then, they were approached by people who had drank themselves into a place like this. And then the calls started to be made, the 12-step calls or whatever you want to call them at the time. But you couldn't talk to a guy who was inebriated, of course, because either he's going to be violent or he's going to love you, man. But he doesn't have a clue what's going on. And then in the story where it talks about the doctor who explained the pressure of alcohol on the brains of these people, some of them ruptured because of the physical ramifications that excessive drinking over a long period of time did. So it was all different myriads of that description, but how are you going to talk to someone who's out of their mind with alcohol and talk to them about the 12-step program and honesty and confession and restitution and all that? They might be seeing things on the wall that aren't there, going through the DTs. And it's my understanding that alcohol is one of the maybe 2 or 3 withdrawals that are deadly, whereas heroin's a bad, you don't want to withdraw from heroin if you don't have to without some help, but that won't kill you. Withdraw from alcohol depending on how dependent on it you will. So I think this, that, and some other whatever medication they were giving them. I don't know if it was Xanax or I forget the name of it now, but there was another chemical that the doctors were just prescribing the medication for, that withdrawal from that could be deadly as well, with some type of calming effect, whatever they call that.
Thank you. Rob, I don't know if you've got the THIQ article about the allergy. Yeah, thank you. You can drop that in the chat as well. So Bill was talking about coming off heroin. There was a study where very quickly they found that, I'm just going to quickly just read a little bit to you, just about this. A PhD doing research on brain tumors found expired alcoholics a good source of material. Okay. So on autopsies, they would find them from Skid Row. Their bodies would be brought in and their brains dissected. After examining the brains of several victims, she came to the conclusion that they were heroin addicts, but they were not. Because they'd found a significant amount of a highly addictive chemical called something, but its abbreviation is THIQ, deposited on the inner core of the brain of her specimens. She found out that this produced the same chemical process of heroin. And there was no ways that these alcoholics could afford heroin. They were drinking cheap bottle of wine. How did it find its way into these chronic alcoholics? Well, the process of the chemical decomposition of ethanol in the body of an alcoholic notices. So the article's in there, but to sum it up, what it does is it actually, we don't break down ethyl alcohol. We magnetize it so that it attracts more alcohol into our system, just to put it in a nutshell, layman's terms. But the article's just been dropped in the chat. And for our YouTube subscribers, find Bill, find me, find Rob. We'll send that to you. So yeah, on that note, thank you so much to everybody that was here with us tonight. We're going to end it because we don't want to start in the second letter. Let's start the next session in the second letter.